Darkness falls inside the GM Studios halls. Tabletop games where nightmares creep. In a realm where sanity is lost and weak. Welcome to the abyss where dreams shatter. Inside the GM studio, nothing else matters. Blood and chaos, the dark arts unfold. In the realm of role-playing, where legends are told.
Why, hello there in Electric Internet Land. Welcome back to the side question episode of Inside the GM Studio, where me and my co-host field stupidity from the internet about role-playing games. I am your host, David.
I'm Matt.
So what we're going to do is we're going to roll a d20, and hopefully Matt has repopulated the list of questions that he gets from Reddit and other various sources. Ooh, I got a three today.
Okay.
Fuck, bro.
All right. Can you push your laptop forward a little bit? There we go. Check.
Check.
Okay, we're good. It was getting some echo. All right. This one comes from Ulvar Sarani on our Ask Game Masters with the title, Helping the Players to Be More Proactive and More Narrative. I GM for a party of 3. All 3 are not yet used to proactive playing. One of them is generally clueless about what to do in a scene and needs constant reassuring and explanation. The other is a bit hung up on this idea that each encounter is a sort of riddle with only one correct solution, and this solution needs to be reached by her character saying the exact correct words. So no summary and a roll. I try to convince this NPC with my charm and roll for persuasion. And the third mostly resorts to automatic fire. Nice. I would like them to be more active in imagining the scene, figuring out a reasonable course of action, and getting on with it. Encouraging them thus far hasn't really helped. They seem locked in this idea that I am constantly setting a secret trap for them that they will walk into if they don't do the exact right thing. This seems to be enlarged with a wait or ask for them to make a proactive move. How to deal with players who are reactive and suspicious.
Something we all deal with, my man. I hate to say it, but I think it's hardwired in some players to just be that way. But the way to typically help kind of nudge the ship onto the course that you want it is, rather than handling it in a meta way, handle it in world. And what I mean by that is thoughtful and detail-oriented players, which if your players are of the mindset that you're describing, they pretty much have to be, right? They have to be detail-oriented because you can't be paranoid about things if you're not worried about like every edge case scenario, right? So what to do is, in the world, give incentives for the things you want and have bad outcomes happen for the things that you don't want. And I always use the kind of overly distilled, probably too simplistic example of the dichotomy between thoughtful approach, planning, and dynamic and heroic action. So if you want your players to be the kind of players that kick open the door, rush into the room, and kill the monsters, like, it's dynamic and it's heroic, like, be fearless, then when they do that, have that go well. And when they do the inverse, have it go poorly. Like if you want them to kick the door down, instead of like, hang on, I measure the door and I listen at the door and I like see if the door is locked and I peer through the keyhole and I do this and I do this before I ever open the door because I don't know. I poke it with a 10-foot pole before I approach, right? This is the cautious approach. Have something really bad happen when they go to do that. Like, and when they go to do something that you like, and they have it just go well as much as possible. And then you'll subtextually communicate to the players, this is how I want you to be. And if you wanted the inverse to happen, you wanted them to be more cautious because they're just ransacking barbarian murder hobos that just kick down every door and kill every bad guy, then just have the doors be trapped and have the bad guys like hear them coming and coordinate and kick the shit out of them. It's like, whoa, okay, we gotta be a little more cautious. So that's an overly distilled down example, but you can do this on a micro level with just about everything. And then make it a zero-sum game. Don't just reward behavior you like, punish behavior you don't like. And so it's like if your players are suffering from inaction, just make inaction a thing that gets punished, right? Like you're standing around too long in the hallway discussing stuff. There's a patrol guard. He comes up and he attacks you, like because you've just been standing here for 5 minutes having a conversation instead of navigating through the dungeon in a way that's more organic. So really the issue comes down to a puzzle to be solved is much more analytical. But what you really want to try to tease out is what are your characters curious about? If you want them to have more organic encounters and be more, as he says, proactive, by which I assume he means make the plot happen for themselves.
Yes.
Then you need to just try to figure out what they're curious about. So listen carefully to what it is they're saying, and you can have a little meta rapport here. This is the thing that I really, when I have players like this, so one of my players, Patrick, is this way, and like because he's a programmer and he thinks in this analytical way, and he's like, okay, your job is to kind of build the world, and you have a idea of what the world is like, and so I'm trying to kind of understand that he's what you call like a red team person, right? Like he's always trying to like test the fence of a system and find out like what are different uses for a particular system and where are the flaws in it and all this shit. And that works for a lot of things. But sometimes he'll just ask me a question like how tall is the table in the room?
Yeah.
And there's a concrete answer to that, right? But my other player, Cody, is a little better about just asking what he really wants to know. So he might frame something like, is the table short enough that I could jump up on it without an athletics check? Right? Like he's trying to get a sense of that. He gives me a little more context. And so if I want a rigid world that has well-defined edges and rules, the first tactic is fine, right? Like I give specific answers, like whatever, like and a character goes like, I come in and I like swoop it and I go, no, hang on, there's no torch on that wall, right? Like you don't have that in your pack, like, and you go, oh, okay, then they learn very quickly, like, oh, okay, I gotta kind of be more whatever. But if I wanted it to be a little more freeform or organic, then the answer doesn't become a concrete number. The table is 3.7 feet tall, right? It's just like, yeah, you can jump up on it pretty easily. Or, you might need to do an acrobatics check, but it's be pretty easy, especially for somebody that's trained in it, has high dex like you, right? That's a pretty simple answer. But they both elicit very different results, even though they're the same. They're the same intent. And so you could do a little meta rapport with your characters to try to tease out what it is that they're curious about. And if characters are curious about things, then they should be pursuing the things that provoke their curiosity, especially if you don't give them the impression that there is a concrete answer, a puzzle to be solved. There's a door, you need to get to the other side of the door. There's only one way to get to the other side of the door. That communicates narratively, subtextually, metally, in a meta sense. It's a meta narrative, right? That there is a certain way to proceed. But if it's
meta, Metalistic?
Yeah, metalistic. Let's go with that. Um, that it just fosters a certain type of dynamic. But if it's like, I don't know, there's a door here, like, and it's locked. Okay, you could kick it down. You could look for a alternate route into the same room. You could pick the lock. You could, do a variety of things. And generally speaking, if the players try a certain thing and it just goes very poorly and they do that enough, then you're basically what you're doing is subtextually communicating like, no, there's one way through, right? And players kind of, there's certain things that are shorthand for them understanding that. You come up to a door, it's got like a magical force field on it. And you go, okay, I probably need something specific to get to the other side of that. But if it's just more or less plain door, then they might think in terms of like, okay, how can I test the edges? But really, what you're trying to do is trying to get an understanding of what your players are curious about. Try to foster that curiosity so that it provokes some semblance of action, and then if that action is within the realm of something you want, try to reward it. And not by like tinkering with things, but by just creating a scenario that rewards action over inaction or decisiveness over passivity or whatever. And then if it's something that you don't want, then try to figure out like build into the concept that there will be bad consequences that happen from it.
Yeah, when it comes to getting players involved into this, hold on, I want to make sure whatever he's saying up here. Because it pretty much was, what was it? How to deal with players who are reactive and suspicious. Okay. Not exactly the same as what I was going for, but like being more active in doing different things than just, like he said, his players, as soon as they open up the door and see enemies, all they do is go right in and attack until, number go up and dead. One thing I did back in 4th edition that we still do now, but David doesn't add the little carrot that I had dangling on a stick. That I said, if you use your minor action to make a knowledge check on these creatures and you find out their weaknesses and their strengths and all that, after you get 3 of them, everybody got a +2 to attack. And I think that's it. I don't know if I added it to damage or not, but I know I gave them a +2 to attack against these creatures. But also what it did is if they had any vulnerabilities they found out, they also were able to start to put plans together with some creatures, realizing that, oh, if we do this sort of thing, it'll be better. Oh, if we get them in sunlight, we'll do this. Oh, our cleric has the sunlight spell. We can use this. It made them a little bit more into like figuring out these creatures and using their vulnerabilities against them and using some other things that made it a little bit more fun. Now David he just gives us knowledge, but it's a free roll. He just lets us do, oh yeah, if you want to do a knowledge check, go for it. There's no bonus to it, but it's always livens up the game a little bit, the combat, because you get to learn a little bit about them and some different ways of taking them down.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was going to say, if you want to talk about, because you talked about, rewards like that. I know it's it's an actual mechanical reward, and it's not like a story reward or anything, but at least it's something. It gives them something to go for.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of mechanical rewards. Not that I think there's anything wrong with them, but I think that they kind of what I was getting at is I didn't really use the reward. I used the word incentive, right?
Right.
And
Yeah. That's it.
so to me, they're different, and here's why. Because a reward is something that gives the players a concrete thing. And what I worry about is if I do like you get a +2 if you get 3 successful knowledge checks on a monster. Then the players are just chasing that +2 instead of trying to figure out a way to use the information that they gain. That's easy enough to gain. It doesn't cost them anything except just the thought to do a roll. How can I use that information and that knowledge to in some way give us an advantage over the enemy? And the advantage is its own reward, right? Like, and then the player feels like it's a little more earned, and they're not just mechanics mining. I worry about that especially with players like Cody and Patrick. They're mechanics miners. They just figure out a way to kind of like break a system. And so that's kind of like where I'm at with that. But like since he or she said that the players are too reactive as opposed to being proactive, then I suspect that the problem is that you're putting too much in front of them that they didn't earn. And so sometimes you just need to allow that to sit, as uncomfortable as it is. I've done this before where I thought players were just being too cautious, too reactive, waiting for me to do something. And then it's just like, I'm just like, nothing happens, right? Just
Hmm.
nothing, right? Like nothing's going to happen unless you, subtextually, what I'm telling them is nothing is going to happen unless you make it happen. And so some players view the world as an ever evolving, ever populating sandbox. So you get this every now and again when a player like almost is too proactive, and they like kind of derail the campaign. Oh, I'm okay. We're in this village, and I'm gonna go out into the woods or whatever, and you're just like, okay, um, they're being proactive, but I don't need to incentivize that. I just go, okay, you walk out into the woods and it's cold and it's dark and it's empty and you don't see or hear anything. I'm like, oh, I gotta go over and play. Is there any peculiar trees or anything? It's like, I mean, there are trees out here, you know. I go up and climb up to the top of one of them. Okay, it's just quiet. You hear an owl hooting. But more or less, there's a reason that most people kind of sit in the village because there's just not much going on out here. And if they just spin their wheels on that for a little while, they will eventually grok. Like there's no there, right? There's
Hmm.
no mystery to be solved. There's no whatever. And sometimes what you need to make it is just kind of soul crushingly boring for them. Um, because if their brain can't find something to latch onto, then they can't perceive a threat. They can't be paranoid. So try saying less when your players query things that could be a rabbit hole that they could go down to like justify an action or just whatever. Um, just try being very simple and terse with the way you describe things, and you might even give a qualitative meta assessment every now and again, like, well, I'm trying to see like how many people like or whatever, like, is there any noise from the other side? And you could just say, no, it's quiet, but you could also just occasionally add something like, you don't perceive any threats, right? It just seems more or less safe. And given your passive perception, you have pretty good confidence to buy that if there was a threat, you would be able to perceive it or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, you can just do a lot with a little, like, but generally, the more you say, the more fodder that like a paranoid or a really like meticulously minded player can latch onto. This has happened to all of us where it's like we give some flavor description of a room or what a character is wearing or something, and then someone just is like, "Oh, he mentioned that." And so now I'm latching onto it and it's important. And it's like, well, no, it was just kind of there for texture. So you have to be able to exercise some restraint in your descriptions and player actions. We've all crafted some NPC that's more or less a throwaway NPC that the characters are like, I'm really interested in what he does for a living. I'm gonna, ask him to,
Yeah.
come to our like room or whatever and hang out. And like, you're like, okay, that guy is like a fucking baker or whatever. He's just here to give you information. But I've gone on this jag before on this show about making throwaway NPCs more interesting than they need to be because you think that there needs to be texture. Save that stuff for the thing that's important because players do think that the things that you talk about and how much attention you give them are the most important things, and they should be.
Another thing that I think might help this, I don't know, I might be thinking again, because I'm looking over the wording of the question here, and I don't know if that's correct for us, like, dealing with players who are reactive and suspicious. But one thing that David does now, and I use not as much, but I think is a good idea, is every now and then when our arc or the adventure that we're on kind of comes to a standstill or forks in the road, David will ask us, hey, what are your guys' plans? Like, these are your open quests that you have. Which one do you think you're going for next? And is there any other motive or any other target that you have while doing this? And I think that kind of gives us a heads up to be, oh, we're going to be active during this quest. So this is what we're going to be doing. Maybe it'll give your players some time to think about it and get a little bit more into it. And it gives the GM a possibility to maybe flesh out few other things with asking questions of the players, and it'll just give you a few times that you can bring them in to add to the world.
Mhm.
Uh, but I think that's a good play as well. Like, don't feel bad for asking questions like that. Like, what's your guys' plan? Where's your next, trip to? Or, what, so like, if you just want to sit down and be like, what do you want your character to achieve this session? Like, that's not a terrible question. It's something that you can
Yeah.
bring up.
Yeah. It's because sometimes this happens where it's like players will be like, I don't know, whatever, like, what are we doing? And it's like, rather than ask what you're doing, state a preference, like, try to force your players into declarative statements.
Hmm.
Like, you ask them a question, or another player asks them a question, try to make them make a declarative statement and get clarity. Like, what are you saying? Like, what, okay, I'm trying to understand like what you're curious about, right? And so sometimes if a player's head brain works a certain way, they don't think about the fact that you can't read their mind and you don't know what it is they're thinking. So, how tall is the table? It's like, yeah, that has a straightforward answer. What is the door made of? It has a straightforward answer, one that you could come up with if you didn't envision it already. But like trying to go like, well, why are you asking this, right? Like, what is it you're really wondering? And usually just that one question, like, what are you wondering or why do you want to know, will provoke from them a concrete answer. And once they have a concrete declaration, it'll anchor in their brain that they have a concrete thing that they're going to do next.
Hmm.
And and once they have that concrete thing that they're going to do next, presumably they will act on it. And so you won't have the problem of trying to understand. So it's like twofold. You can handle it a little bit in a meta narrative and what things you choose to pay attention, draw the player's attention to. Two, how you interact with the players and just a real soft touch trying to get an idea of what they're curious about by asking them some meta questions or like just kind of holding them to making declarative, concrete statements. And then within the context of the world, provide incentives for the things that you like and punitive action for things that you don't like. Across those three metrics, I think you'll probably be able to nudge your players in the right direction.
One that I love doing, that I haven't done recently. Of course, I haven't run any actual games recently, but it's been a while since I've done this. At any time, I used to like doing it right at the beginning of combat, or if there was like a super slow time going on that just felt more cozy and was just a fun time. I will just stop and, like I said, it could be right at the beginning of a combat, right at their initiative order. Say, what's going through your character's mind right now? Like, what's just
Mhm.
going through their head? And it kind of just makes a player go like, huh, get into the scene and think about it for a little bit. And just like, sometimes it could be just like, oh, thinking about grabbing a hot dog because that sounds awesome right now. Or it could be a multi-paragraph, feeling of, things that have been going on and thinking about their family and yada yada. But I think it's a cool one that just kind of, it's just a simple question that makes them, snap, and they're just like, oh, I'm in this scene. And I start,
It's
bringing up some things that they were thinking about.
because it anchors in the player that the things that are their character is experiencing, the things that they're thinking, in some way ought to manifest in what their characters do.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
and sometimes, like Chris Davis, one of my old players, um, he was notorious for kind of giving very detailed, very specific, very like he was an actor, and so he's like all about kind of getting in the mind of a character, and then he'd give these very detailed like whatever, and then I have to actually follow it up with like, well, okay, like what are you doing? Like how does that manifest? And sometimes he'd be like, well, I'm not really doing anything. I'm just thinking about that, and it's like, okay, that's cool, but like you need to realize that our thoughts and the things in this particular instance, hopefully the things that you're curious about, the things that you're suspicious of, the things that you are wondering, something in some way in a role-playing game ought to be actionable, especially in one that's a more action-oriented medieval fantasy.
Hmm.
It should some way be actionable, and you do that at this outset of a battle, you know, it could frame in the character's mind like, oh, I'm thinking about things in this way. How might that change the way I approach this fight? And, how might I, change my tactics or whatever? Maybe I'm gunning for this particular, the bugbear warlord at the back of the party, and that'll govern how I approach the fight. And then, every now and again, you might need to gently point out some things that are contradictions. If the player is saying one thing, saying they want one thing, but behaving in a way that's a contradictory way, or trying to say two things at the same time, like I'm strongly, I really think that we should be going here, but I'll just kind of go along with what the party wants. It's like, okay, so which is it? Do you just want to go along, or do you have a strong opinion? It's like they're mutually exclusive, right? And if you're being one way all of the time, then there's nothing wrong with having tension and character contradictions, but try to make the player account for them. And what that'll do is if they feel accountable for their character's actions, then they'll act more deliberately. And if they're acting more deliberately, they'll be more likely to be more decisive about what it is that they're doing.
All right. Unless you got anything to add on the end here, David, I think we might be at the end. You got anything to top off? All
Nope.
right. Good. I think that's going to do it for this one. We'll just leave this one with a good night.